So good morning again, and welcome to the second session. Okay, now today what we're going to do is, of course, continue from where we left off yesterday. But today's session would be more about the configuration and the setup on our lab environment, because yesterday we spent a good amount of time understanding the concepts related to the site-to-site VPN, both in terms of pre-shared key config as well as the digital certificates. But we didn't really look at any kind of command line or any kind of a configuration related to that. I mean, the only thing that we really went over was in the slides, and we looked at some examples or configuration examples related to that. But today we'll actually set up a lab on GNS3, and I also have my virtual machine running Windows Server 2008, and that's going to be our CA server. Okay, so let me just quickly rearrange my window out here so that we can start working on it. Yeah. So everything good at your end? Okay, great. So I'll just give it a name here, the GNS3 project, so that I can start setting up the topology. Okay, so now I'm using this particular version of GNS3, which is like kind of old as compared to the latest one. This is, I think, version 1.3.11. That's what I'm utilizing out here. And I think the current version that is available is 1.5.2. Now, the reason I chose to use this particular version of GNS3 is because this particular version of GNS3 supports ASA version 8.4.2 or the older version of ASA, but whereas the new version or the current version of GNS3 supports the virtual ASA or the ASA-V, which we have, and like since I've had a very good configuration and like perfect setup with regards to 8.4.2, I prefer to use this particular version of GNS3 here, and that's what I'm going to continue to work. And for my virtual machine, that's my Windows Server 2008. This is basically linked to one of my virtual adapters on my laptop or on this particular machine here. And that's what I'm going to connect to the GNS3 topology, and we'll use this particular machine as the CA server. Now, I've already done some basic config to this 2008 server, because based on our discussion yesterday, like since we wanted to go over the config of a CA server, I prefer to put up just the installation of the basic installation of 2008 with IP addressing and machine name, but I did not install any of the services or roles or anything of that sort. In fact, we'll start right from that point. We'll start right from the start, wherein we look at the installation of the various roles and features and set up the CA server completely according to what we need. Okay. Okay. So I think what I'll do first is, before we even start working on the virtual machine there, I'll just quickly put up a topology diagram here so that we can start doing the basic config of the IP addressing and stuff like that. And then once you've done the basic config, we'll get on into the virtual machine and start setting the 2008 server as well. Okay. So let me put up a topology first. So what I have in this topology is I'll go ahead and add an ASA firewall first. And the first demonstration that we are going to work on would be like a site-to-site VPN using ASA firewalls. Okay, so we'll have two different ASA firewalls, and we'll go ahead and set that up according to the digital certificate-based authentication. And then after that, we'll look over to the next scenario wherein we'll think about adding another site, maybe using a router, and then through that, we'll set up the site-to-site, okay? So I have my ASA firewall here, but I'll add one more. There you go, that's my ASA2. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'll add a 3745 router, let's say. Now this would be acting as my host, okay? So, I mean, rather than relying on loopbacks and stuff like that, I'll prefer to use a router as a host, which will be part of the private network. and I'll add one more router at the other end, which will be like site 2 router. Okay, this is again a host in site 2. And then just to make it much more practical, what I'll do is I'll introduce one more router here. And this router is going to act as my ISP router. Okay, so basically what we are going to look at is, we'll put up a scenario wherein this entire topology would look more like a real-time scenario wherein the ASA external interface would be like a public network, or would be connected to the public network, and then the other interface or the inside interface would be connected to the private network. Okay, so that's how I want to set it up. So I'll just name it as ISP here, so that this router can represent an ISP router. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm also going to add a cloud. That cloud will be typically useful for connecting to the CA server. Okay. And what I'll do next is I'll give this particular cloud a name, and I'll give it a name of Internet, so that it will simulate the Internet cloud. And the next thing is I'll just configure this cloud to connect to one of my virtual adapters on this particular machine, and I'm using VMnet 1. The reason I'm using this is because my virtual machine, that's the 2008 server, is actually bridged to this VMnet 1 adapter, and that's exactly what I'm going to connect to out here. Okay, so I think that's good. And now let me go ahead and do the physical connection. Now, of course, from the ASA1 and ASA2 to the ISP, I'm going to use fast Ethernet here. In fact, I'll put up every connection as fast Ethernet, so that we need not worry about serial or WAN interfaces or their configurations associated with that. As long as we understand the concept of VPN, that would be our focus with regards to the configuration out here. Okay, so what I'll also do is put up some notes here so that we understand what network are we trying to work upon. So 192.168.10.0/24 is the network that we'll use out here. And then between R2 and ASA2, I'll add 192.168.20.0/24. Okay. Apart from that, now here between ASA1 and the ISP, we are going to include a network of 100.0.100.0/30. Okay, just to indicate that it's a direct connection between ASA1 and the ISP. And same way, I'll add another network, let's say 200.0.200.0/30. And the next thing that we are going to do is, like out here on the ISP or behind the ISP, which connects it towards the Internet, I'll put up a network of 150.0.150.0/24, where my CA server actually has an IP address of 150.0.150.100. Okay. Now there is a feature under GNS3 wherein I can go ahead into preferences and I can actually add a virtual machine here. But unfortunately, I think this version of GNS3 only supports virtual machines that are running on Oracle VirtualBox. Okay, it does not support the VMware virtual machine. In fact, like if I click on new, okay, there you go. It only supports the VBox Manage or the VirtualBox machine here. I do not think it supports, it does not support a virtual machine here. So that's the reason I'm putting up a cloud here, okay, which will put up my connectivity to my Windows Server 2008. So let me go ahead and do that. As far as connectivity is concerned, okay, R1 F0/0 is what I'll use, and that will connect to ASA1 on Ethernet 1. Now, even though it shows Ethernet 1 here, but when you actually connect to the ASA, you'll notice that it is gigabit 0 and gigabit 1. That is what you'll see as the interfaces. So Ethernet 0, I'll connect it to the ISP. So for this example, I'll use fast Ethernet 0/0 here, and fast Ethernet 0/1 is going to connect to ASA2. So ASA2 on Ethernet 0, and Ethernet 1 will go over to R2 on fast Ethernet 0/0. So that's going to be our topology. And if you notice here, I'll also connect the cloud. Cloud is going to connect to fast Ethernet 0/1/0 of the ISP router. Okay, so that should do with regards to our connections here. There you go. Okay. Now, as far as individual host IPs are concerned, what I'll also do is I'll put up some notes indicating that as well. So R1 is going to be .10, and ASA1, or the gateway for this R1, is going to be .1. Same way, out here, I'm going to put up ASA1 as .2, and ASA2 also would be .2 in the respective subnet. Okay, and then I'll add one more note here. So ASA2 would be .1, and R2 is going to be .10 again. Okay, that's of course considering that the network is 192.168.20.0. Apart from that, I'll also make sure that I put up IP addresses here. So that's going to be .1 out here, and even for this network, it's going to be .1. Apart from that, now here on this interface, it's going to be .1 here, and the server, like I said, is going to be .100. So that's the IP address of my CA server. Okay, so I'll just put it up here so that it's clearly visible. So that's going to be our topology. And as you can see, none of our devices are powered on, and none of them have been configured either. Okay, so there is no configuration done at all. It's like a blank topology out there. So let's go ahead and start configuring at least the basic stuff, so that we can have a topology up and running, and then we'll focus more on the CA server. Okay, setting up the CA server. So I'll just power on the devices here. Okay, so it's powering on, and I'll also make sure that I do a check with regards to my CPU and memory utilization. So at this point, it shows 100% CPU utilization. That's because the devices are powering on. So I'll just give it a little bit of time. Of course, I mean, ideally, I would have gone in for switching on the devices one at a time, or maybe few devices at a time. But since I powered on everything together, that's why it shot up to 100% here. But after a little while, we should see that things are good. Okay. It's just the ASA which might be booting up at this point, which may be like really taking up all the resources. Okay, so R1 is good, R2 is also good, and as far as ASA1 and ASA2, they're still booting up, and ISP router is also good. So all my routers have booted up. It's just a matter of ASA1 and ASA2 coming up, and that's why the CPU was 100. But as you can see, now since we see that the ASA has initialized, the CPU is like considerably dropping down. And I think it should do good with regards to our final stable value. Okay. I'll just give it a little bit of time again. So is the text under the putty screen clear enough for you? I mean, I've just increased the font size and I've made it bold. So are you able to read it clearly? Okay, great. Okay, there you go. That's my ASA2, which has come up. So I'll just minimize it. And how about ASA1? ASA1 is also good. Now, the next important thing that I'm going to do is, I just remembered that I forgot to put up the activation key on these firewalls. So if I type show version here, well, as you can see, the VPN for DES and VPN for triple DES are both disabled. Even though it says that it's a 5520 VPN Plus license, it does not have all the features activated. So let me go ahead and quickly activate those features so that we can start working on our lab environment. Okay. So let me just put up the activation key out here. I just have it in a notepad file here. So I'll just copy it and paste it out here. There you go. Done. And what I'll also do is I'll just put the same thing on ASA2 as well. Okay, so this just made the license from restricted to unrestricted, but I'll just quickly power them off and power them on again so that I can, put up the additional license so that it gets the complete feature set that we need. Okay, I think we can do that. So let me quickly go over and. Okay, so at this point, I have loaded the activation key and my firewalls are up and running. Okay, so yeah, so what I'll do is I'll quickly start off with first of all the router config with the appropriate IP addressing and stuff like that. Okay, and then we'll come over to the Windows Server 2008. Okay, so let me quickly go over and do that. So I'll start off with router R1. And the only thing that I'm going to do out here is put up a default route pointing out to the ASA. So R1 is ready. I'll get on into router R2. That's also good. And now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'll quickly configure the ISP router as well. And then we'll finally work on the ASA firewall. Because ASA firewall will involve more than configuring the IP. I mean, we also need to configure NAT on it. So that will be like an additional config. So since it's a /30, I just put up the subnet mask accordingly. Now that's the second interface, and I'll now go ahead and configure the third one, which goes to my virtual machine. So I need not configure any kind of routing here because, this would be simulating or emulating my service provider router. So it would not have any routes towards the private network at all. But the next important thing is I just make sure that it's able to communicate with my Windows Server 2008. Okay. So ping 150.0.150.100. That's IP address of my 2008 server. And at this point, it's not pinging. Possibility could be since I've not installed any roles out here or features out here on the server, the firewall may be active on this particular machine. So what I'll just do is I'll just open up the command prompt, and from here, I'll try to ping the router. So I think that should definitely work. So IP config, there you go. That's the IP address that I have. So let me try pinging 150.0.150.1. And as you can see, I do have reachability out there. So things are good from this end. Okay, so it should not be a problem. So Connectivity wise, I mean, basic endpoints are able to talk to each other, but I now need to get on into the firewalls and start working on them. So host name, this is ASA1, so I'll just name it as ASA1. Now, this is what I was talking about. Like, as far as this firewall is concerned, it has 3 gigabit Ethernet interfaces. So that's what I'm going to utilize out here, okay? Interface G0. That's going to be the outside. I'll just use the basic names like inside and outside. And as you know, like since it's a firewall, no need to define the subnet mask. It will automatically do that for me. So that's the configuration that I did, and I'll just make sure of that by pinging the directly connected devices. That's not good. Actually, the route at this point is not needed because I'm just directly trying to connect to the ISP router, that is 100.0.100.1, which is like if you look at the topology, from this particular firewall, I'm directly trying to ping this interface of the router. Okay, so it should have worked, but it's not working at this point. So let me check up on the ISP router itself, whether the interface is up. It is definitely up, so that's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so interface is definitely up. There's nothing wrong with that, but let me check up on ASA1 again. Yeah, it's still not pinging. So what I'll do is I'll come back to that. I mean, because the default route, like I mentioned, would be useful to reach, or for this ASA to reach this ASA2, you know, that's on a different network. But to directly reach here, it does not really need a route, you know, so it should be all right. But what I'll do next is from ASA1, I'll try to ping router R1. So ping 192.168.10.10. So even that's not working. So I think it's more to do with the ASA firewall itself. Okay, so maybe it's not booted up right or something going on with it. So I'll just save it real quick. And then what I'll do next is, okay, so I'll just go into ASA2. Yep, I think it's more to do with the firewall because as you can see, if I place my mouse on top of ASA1, it shows 4 interfaces there, Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1, Ethernet 2, and Ethernet 3. But if I actually get on into the firewall and type in show interface IP brief, it's just showing 3 interfaces. So I think all the interfaces have not initialized on this particular firewall. So what I'll just do is, since I have saved it, I might as well like reboot the firewall. I'll just switch it off and then power it on again. So once it reboots, I think it should start working. Meanwhile, I'll get on into ASA2 and work on that, okay? Okay. So show interface IP3. And as you can see here, it shows all the 4 interfaces that we need. Okay, so I think it's something to do with ASA1 not booting up or not initializing, right? So, you know, that's some of the problems associated with working in a virtualized environment. Okay, so I have enabled both the interfaces here. So if I type show interface IP brief, I should see both of them up. So let me try pinging from here. Ping 200.0.200.1. And as you can see, it's working. So it's definitely a problem with ASA1 not booting up right. Okay, ping 192.168.20.10. That's router R2, and as you can see, even that is pinging. Now I'll just add a default route so that it can communicate with the remote public network. Okay, so route outside, and then 0/0. 200.0.200.1. Okay. Somehow my ASA2 has stopped responding. Yeah, so my firewall is back up and running. So I'll just quickly add the route because everything else seems to be good. So route outside, and then 0/0, and then 200.0.200.1. Okay, so there you go. ASA2 is up and running at this point. Now let me get on into ASA1 and ping 100.0.100.1. Yeah, so it is definitely working. And ping 192.168.10.10 is also working. So I'll just quickly add a route here as well. Yeah. Okay, so that is good. I'll just quickly save it so that we do not lose the config. But I'll also try to check now if I can ping all the way up to ASA2. Okay, so 200.0.200.2. And as you can see, ASA1 is able to reach up to ASA2. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'll try to check from my virtual machine if I can reach ASA1 and ASA2 at least. Okay, so ping 100.0.100.2, and as you can see, I do have reachability there, and that is ASA1, 200.0.200.2, and I do have reachability to ASA2 as well. Okay, so that's good enough. So I do have connectivity and everything has been set up just right. Okay, so the basic IP addressing. But now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and configure PAT on this ASA firewall so that at least the natting and all that kind of stuff is done, and we should have then reachability throughout. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that as well. Because at this point, if I get on into router R1, for example, which is behind ASA1, R1, even though it has a default route, if I try to ping 100.0.100.1, that's the ISP router, as you can see, it is not able to do the ping because there you go. I mean, the traffic can definitely exit the firewall, but the return traffic cannot come back because of the NAT configuration being missing on ASA1, as well as on ASA2 for that matter. So let me quickly go ahead and do that, okay? So since it is 8.4.2, I need to make sure that I go ahead and deploy the new version of NAT config that is available for 8.4 or all the current versions of ASA, okay? That is object-based NAT or that kind of a config, okay? So let me go ahead and do that as well. So object network, and then I'll give it a name of inside _ NW, let's say, and then network, or in fact subnet 192.168.10.0, 255.255.255.0. That's my internal network. Okay, and then I'll type NAT inside, comma, outside, and then I'll type interface. Sorry, it should be dynamic interface. Yeah, that should do it. And that takes care of the patch config here. Okay. I mean, I can verify it by getting back into R1 and checking out the ping.
Wait a minute. Are you trying to ping?
Okay. So yeah. So let me get back into R1 again. So the ping is not working out because of the ICMP inspection not happening. But if I try to telnet 100.0.100.1, the telnet should definitely work. I mean, it would not connect maybe, but at least I should be able to see that it is trying to open up. So which means the connectivity is getting through for sure. Okay, so that's a good idea to check. I mean, rather than opening up ICMP inspection, I think the telnet option is working out here, which means the NAT is also good enough. Okay, so I can cross-check that by going into ASA1 and type show XLA. There you go. I do see that I have a TCP path going in from 192.168.10.10 towards the outside. Okay, so it's translating to the outside interface IP address out here. And if I type show conf, I should see nothing in use right now because that telnet connection, even though it opened up, it got disconnected as well. But that telnet connection being successful or showing that it is open, meaning that the NAT or the PAT is definitely working on there. Now, similarly, I'll do it on ASA2 as well. On ASA2, okay, so I'll type object network and I'll give it a name again as inside underscore NW and then subnet. Okay, good. And NAT inside, comma, outside. And then dynamic interface. Okay, so I'm just doing a basic patch configuration out here so that we can do a quick check with regards to that. So again, just like before, I'll get on into router R2, which is behind ASA, and I'll try to telnet into 200.0.200.1, that is the ISP router. And as you can see, it shows open. And what I'll also do is I'll try to telnet into 100.0.100.1, which is nothing but the other interface. So from R2, I'm trying to telnet into this interface. So at least I should be able to see that I'm able to cross over, the ISP. So let me just check that up. Yeah, so there you go. Even that shows open. So which means things are working just fine. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And if I get on into ASA2 and if I type show conf, there you go. Again, it shows 0 connections because the connections were closed. But if I type show xlate, let's see whether the translation is shown. And as you could see, the translation is definitely shown out here. Okay, so the NAT config is good. So we should have reachability between the peers as well as the internal clients or the private network can actually go towards the internet or to the ISP. Okay, so it shouldn't be a problem at all. Okay, now the next important thing that I'm going to do out here is, like I said, after the basic connectivity and all of that, which I have verified out here, I'll just go ahead and start working on the 2008 server. Okay, so as far as the 2008 server is concerned, like I mentioned earlier, the only thing that I really did was I activated the operating system, set up the time zone, set up the IP address, and set up the machine name. That's about it. I did not install any additional roles or nothing of the sort. And as you can see, roles are none, features are also none. So let me go ahead and like activate or install those roles. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll click on add roles. Now, the primary thing that you need to understand with regards to working with the CA server is, like, now in our scenario, we just have one Windows Server 2008, which means we are only going to have one certificate authority server. So there is no question of root certificate authority and subordinate certificate authority. So that's why the only server that we are going to have is the root CA. Okay, nothing else. I mean, we are not going to have any additional servers out here. Another important aspect is this machine which I'm talking about is not belonging to any domain, or it's not part of Active Directory infrastructure. So naturally, the CA server that I'm going to install, or the CA server that I'm going to set up out here, is going to be like a standalone CA server. Okay, because there are again two different types of deployments when it comes to the CA. You have an enterprise root CA, and then you can have a standalone root CA. Enterprise root CA would be something like the CA server that is running within an Active Directory environment, which is not the case in our setup, right? So that's why the server that we are going to run out here would be a standalone root CA. Okay, so for running the standalone root CA, one of the main prerequisites is, naturally, I mean, apart from the other basic prerequisite like static IP address and all of that, the other main prerequisite is it needs to run IIS, or a web service. The reason it needs to run this web service is so that the devices can connect to this particular CA server and request for the digital certificates. Okay, so that's why we need to make sure that IIS is running, or the web service is running. Okay, and by default, IIS is not running on the 2008 server. So that's why we need to go ahead and add that particular role first. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'll click on Add Rows. And that's the wizard which comes up. Okay, so I'll just click on Next here. And out here, as you can see, these are all the different services, but I'm going to first install the web server. Okay, web server IIS. I'll click on Next. And I'll click on Next again. Okay, now these are all the components that is going to go ahead and install. Okay, I'm not really concerned with what is going to install out here, but the only thing that I'll prefer to normally do is I make sure that ASP and ASP.NET, these two components, I always make sure that I enable them, because I've seen that sometimes, if I do not enable this ASP or ASP.NET support, the interface, the web interface for the default website or any website that I create sometimes does not load if it's running some ASP scripts on it. Okay, so that's why I just make sure that I enable those. Okay, but like majority of the times, even if you do not enable these scripts, it still continues to operate without any problem. But I make sure that I always enable them. Okay, I'll click Next, and I'll click Install. So as you can see, I'm just installing the web server at this point. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and verify whether it is really running good. So the very first steps would be to install the IIS, and that's what we're doing right now. There you go. So it's installed, and I'll click on Close. But I need to make sure that this IIS service is running. Okay. So what I'll do is next, I'll just open up the Internet Explorer. Okay. Now I'll just click on Ask Me Later here, because I just want to make sure that we configure the browser at a later stage. But another important thing that we also need to do, just because we are going to work on this 2008 server for a good amount of time, what I'll also like to do is I'll disable this enhanced security configuration. Okay. Now, the reason why I want to do that is just to make things a bit easier, because every time I try to connect to any website or any particular domain or something, it'll constantly keep on prompting for adding it to a trusted network or adding it to a trusted site list and stuff like that. So I do not want to get onto those aspects. So that's why what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and disable this particular feature. Okay, and I can disable that by getting on into the server manager. Okay, so next to the start button, we have the server manager. So I'll just open that up. And under server manager, okay, that's the first screen that you get. So you just need to scroll down. Of course, again, it's not mandatory that you run this step, but it's always makes it convenient. Okay, so there you go. The Internet Explorer Enhanced Security Config. Okay, that's what I clicked upon. That's the option that I clicked, and that's what I get. And by default, it's on for administrators as well as for user accounts. I'll just turn that off for every user. So it should be good now. Okay, so I've just turned it off. I'll just close this for now. And when I get back in here, and if I, let's say, close this browser window and open it up again, we should see that it comes up with a message of, there you go, it's not anywhere. Okay, so that's good. And now, next thing that I'm going to do is I'll type http:// and localhost. Localhost is basically just trying to connect to myself, and as you can see, it's saying that IS7 or this kind of an image comes up indicating that the web service is running, and it also comes up with a warning out here indicating intranet settings are now turned off by default. So I'll just click on that message and I'll click on enable intranet settings. That's it. So we no longer have any kind of warnings or anything of the sort. So things are good here. Okay. Now this is good, but if you remember, this machine also is running the firewall, right? So I want to make sure that I have reachability from our end here. That is from, let's say, router R1. If I try to connect to this web server, I should have reachability to that. So that's why what I'll try to do is telnet 150.0.150.100 on port 80. And as you can see, it shows open. So I'll type get space / here, and the web interface opens up. So which means I do have reachability all the way from router R1 that is inside towards this particular CA server. And same thing is going to happen from R2 as well. We are not going to do that check, but it's assumed that it's definitely going to work in that fashion. Okay. And even though there is a firewall running on this 2008 server, it has taken care of adding that exception in that firewall to allow that HTTP traffic. Okay. So our web service is currently running. Now let's go ahead and add the next service, that is the CA service. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So let me click on add roles. Next. And out here, now that's what I need to choose, Active Directory Certificate Services. Okay, now it can be a bit misleading sometimes because, when you check this checkbox or when you read this option, it says Active Directory Certificate Service, right? Which means you may think that you need Active Directory, but I mean, there is no additional option that you get. Okay, you need to make sure that you only check this option, Active Directory Certificate Services. Okay. Now, before I continue with this, one most important aspect which I forgot to mention is you cannot just use any version of Windows Server 2008. I mean, especially if you're going to use Windows Server 2008 or Windows Server 2012 for that matter, you need to make sure that the version of Windows Server 2008 that you're going to run is either Data Center or Enterprise Edition. Okay. Now the reason I'm working or I'm talking about these two versions is because whenever we talk about installing certificates on the ASA firewall or a Cisco device like a router or any other device for that matter, you need to run a service called as Network Device Enrollment Service. And when I talk about this Network Device Enrollment Service, that service is only available on these two versions, that is Enterprise and Data Center. A standard edition of Windows Server 2008 will not provide you with that option. Okay, so you need to make sure that the Server 2008 version that you're running is either Enterprise or Data Center. Now the version that I am running in this particular lab is the Enterprise Edition. Okay, so that will definitely support the feature that I'm talking about. You can always verify it, like if you're not sure of what version you're running, the moment you check this Active Directory Certificate Services, let's say, because we are anyways going to install it. So the moment you check that, and when you click on next, okay, and next again, you should see this option here. But if at all you do not see this option, which means the version of Server 2008 that you're running may be a standard option or standard server edition. That's the reason you do not see that option. Okay, so you need to make sure that it's either Enterprise or Data Center edition. Okay, so I'll just check this checkbox also, because certification authority is definitely going to be installed. But I'll also make sure that I check this checkbox. The reason I want to check this checkbox is so that, you know, end users, or if you want to download or request, let's say, a custom certificate for your users, okay, or for some devices on your network, in that case, this web enrollment service will help you open up an interface to the CA server. If you do not check this checkbox, okay, you would not be able to request any certificate through the web, okay. The devices definitely need network device enrollment service. I mean, at least for our objective, this option is not important at all. But I'm doing that just so that I show you, you know, I mean, what difference does it make? So that's why I'll just check this checkbox now. And that's the reason this thing comes up, because it needs some additional role services under IS, which is going to do. So I'll click on add required role services there. There you go. So now I have both of these running. Okay, so remember, this option is not absolutely important. This would be useful if the users want to request or renew certificates on behalf of somebody else. Okay, so like, let's say if you have a smart card reader or something like that, you know, and if you want to use certificates for that as well, then in that case, you need this particular interface. Otherwise, it's not going to open up a web interface for your CA. So I just check that and click next. Now, I'm not checking this option here because the network device enrollment service, if you want to enable it, you need to make sure that the certification authority is installed first. So that's the reason I'm first installing this role, and then I'm going to install the network device enrollment service. Okay, so I'll click next there. There you go. The enterprise option and standalone, that is what it's asking you for. But the enterprise option is grayed out in my server because it's not belonging to a domain, or it's not part of Active Directory at all. So that's why this option is completely grayed out. I won't be able to work on this, but I'll select standalone. I'll click next. And again, I have root CA and subordinate CA. But if you want to install a subordinate CA, you need to make sure that you have a root CA first of all. Now in our case, like I said, this is the only server that I have. So I'm going to keep the option as root CA. Next. And now I'm going to generate a new private key. Now remember, this private key which I'm talking about is only for the CA server. Okay, this private key is not for the individual devices. Individual devices or individual users are going to generate their own private key. That's a different step altogether. But this is for the CA server to generate its own public key, private key pair. Okay, so for that, first of all, it needs a private key, and that's what it's going to generate now. I could use an existing private key, but this would be useful if you already had a CA service which you uninstalled, and now you're trying to reconfigure it or reinstall it, or maybe import it from some other machine or something like that. Okay, so if you want to do that, you can go for this option. But this is like a fresh installation for me, so that's why I'm going to keep it as create a new private key. So I'll just keep it at that. Next. And then these are the options that are available to me. Okay, so I have the cryptographic service provider. I'll just leave it at the default. I'm not going to change that. Key length is going to be 2048. And this is something that you need to make sure about, like, you know, what hashing algorithm are you going to use to sign the certificate or for maintaining the integrity of the certificate. Okay. Now this is important because, you know, these same parameters is what you would like to use on your devices so that they also get a similar kind of a certificate on them. Okay. But now that's the hashing algorithm that I'm going to work with, SHA-1. Okay. I'll just leave it at that. And I'll click on next. And that's the name that is going to use for my CA server, wherein what it really does is it takes the machine name, which in my case, the machine name or server name was WinCA, and then it's going to append -CA along with it. So, I mean, it seems redundant, right? If you look at this particular name. So I'll just go ahead and keep the name as WinCA. Okay, so that's how the distinguished name for this particular CA server is going to be. Okay, so I'll just leave it at that. I click next. And the validity for that particular certificate that's going to be generated is going to be 5 years, which you can change later. But as such, it does not make a difference really. I mean, I can leave it at 5 years. I'll just click on next there. That's the location where it's going to store the database and the logs. So I'll just leave it at that. Next. And there you go. Introduction to web server. That's basically, it's going to install those additional role services under the web server. So that's the reason I made sure that I installed IS beforehand, you know, before I went ahead and installed the CA service. So as you could see, you know, it definitely has a mention of ASP.NET, and that's the reason I made sure that I installed ASP.NET before while installing IIS. Okay, I'll click next. So there you go. These are the components that it's going to install. I'll click on next again and install again. So again, remember, I'm just installing the CA service. Installing the CA service is not going to make the server ready. Okay, for the devices, I also need to install the NDES, or the Network Device Enrollment Service. So that's what we're going to do next once this installation is complete. But again, after this installation, I'm going to go ahead and verify whether it's really functioning. Okay. Done. So I'll just click on close. And now let me go ahead and verify whether that CA service has been installed. So I'll just open up the browser. And I'll type http:// and then I'll type in the IP address or localhost, let's say. Okay. And then /. Now it's going to create a virtual directory by the name of cert srv. Okay, so remember, it is HTTP, the IP address of the server or localhost, and then cert srv is the virtual directory that is going to create. It's because I selected that option or that role service by the name of certificate enrollment web service. Okay, so if I do not select that certificate enrollment web service, this virtual directory won't be created. Okay, so it also acts like a testing environment for me, once I enable that particular service, so that I can check whether my CA service is running. And there you go. If this interface opens up, you are good to go. Okay, so your CA service is definitely running, and you can request a certificate or download the CA certificate and stuff like that. Okay, so this is a good idea. Now, if this web enrollment service was not installed, let's say, if you had just installed the CA service, then in that case, you had to actually go into Server Manager. Under roles, you had to look at Active Directory Certificate Services, expand it, and then you have the machine, and it should show you green, indicating that the CA service is running. And if I click on issued certificates, okay, it's blank because it has not issued any certificates. Again, revoked certificates also would be blank. Failed request also is blank. Pending request, nothing there really, because it has not issued any certificates at all, right? But if I right click on this particular server and go into properties, okay, there you go. That's my CA certificate. And if I click on this view certificate, that's my certificate, which is valid for a period of 5 years. So that's what you need to do, if at all you want to verify it without the web enrollment service. Instead of that, you can actually do the verification in a simpler fashion by using this web interface here. Okay. So, okay, my CA service has been installed. I'll just close this. Now let's go ahead and install the next important service, that is NDES. Okay, so let's do that. So I click on now. For the NDES, or the Network Device Enrollment Service, it's a part of the CA service or the Certification Authority Service. So that's the reason I cannot click on Add Roles and install that. Okay, I have to go in for, see, if I click on Add Roles at this point, and if I click on Next, there you go. It's already saying that Certificate Services is installed. I cannot do any modifications to this. That's the reason to install the NDES, I'll have to close or cancel this wizard. I'll have to open up Server Manager, and under Server Manager, okay, you need to go into roles, okay, and by keeping the roles selected, I'll have to scroll down in this right hand side pane, okay, and there you go. That's where you'll see that these are the two services that you have installed at this point, but Network Device Enrollment Service is not installed. So you'll have to click on this link which says Add Role Services. And that's what brings you to this particular screen, okay? So remember, that's the additional step that you need to perform for your devices to receive a certificate. So I'll just check this checkbox here, Network Device Enrollment Service, okay? And now, before I proceed ahead with this particular wizard, there are some additional things that I need to take care of. What is that? The additional thing that I want to make sure about is, since it was a lab environment, I did not create separate user accounts on this particular machine. I did not give them custom permissions or anything of the sort. For all of my configuration, I'm just going to use the default administrator account, okay, the Windows administrator account, which anyways has full privilege. But even under that, I need to make sure that I have a user account with the appropriate service privileges. Okay, what I mean by service privileges is like, let's say I open up the local users console out here on this particular server. So lusr mgr.msc, that's the shortcut for it. Okay, that's local user manager.msc. That's the Microsoft console that I'm going to run. There you go. That's what opens up. So remember, the shortcut is lusr mgr.msc. So when I open this up, under users, I do have the administrator account for sure. Okay, but then when I go into groups, okay, and if I go into the administrators group, I do have the administrator account listed under that. But the problem with that is, you know, when you install IIS, it also creates a default group by the name IIS_IUSRS. Okay, and if you look at the membership of that, the administrator account is not part of that. So you need to make sure that whatever account you're going to utilize for using this NDES service, that user account should be belonging to this particular group. Okay, so that's why I'm just going to click on the add button here. I'm going to type administrator so that this account becomes a part of the user group. Okay, so that's the administrator account. I'll click OK there, and I'll click OK again, and done. Now my group membership is good. Okay, so remember, there is supposed to be a user account who needs to have complete administrative privileges on this machine, plus that user account also needs to belong to this particular built-in group that is related to IIS. Okay, so you need to make sure that it belongs to this particular group. And now, based on this, let's go ahead and continue with our installation. Okay, so before you continue with this installation, you need to make sure that the appropriate group memberships are taken care of. Okay, so I'll keep this option checked. I'll click next, and now there you go. This is what it's asking you for. Specify user account. So out here, I'll click on select user, and now it's asking me for that username and password. Okay. Now the username is administrator, and the password, I just put up a complex password for this account, so I'll just type that in. Okay. So for my example, the password that I'm utilizing, so just so that you know what I'm utilizing out here, is uppercase P at SSW0RD. This is what I'm utilizing as my password for this account. Okay, so I'll just minimize it. Yeah, so username would be administrator and the password. And when I click on OK, there you go. It accepted it because it had the privileges, and it clearly says the user must be a member of the domain if at all it's belonging to Active Directory, and it also must be added to the local group. That is this particular group, which I already did. So that's why, in my case, the conditions have been satisfied. I'll just click on next, and there you go. That's the name of the RA that is going to create. So whenever you are enabling this particular service, that is Network Device Enrollment Service, you're actually configuring something called as a registration authority. So the registration authority is the service that is going to manage the certificate request from devices. Okay. So that's the name that is going to give to this particular registration authority. And what I'll do next is, for the country, of course, it is US, but let's say I'll just change it over to, since I'm in Thailand, I might as well set it across to TH or Thailand. There you go. And I can put up some additional or optional information out here, but it's not absolutely important that you need to fill that up. So since it's optional, I'll just leave it empty. I click on next. And there you go. That's the key length and the encryption key length and stuff like that. I'll just leave it at the default. I click next. And there you go. That's the summary of all the info. And that's the URL which the devices are going to get the password from. I mean, because when the devices are going to request for the certificate, they are going to request it with a particular URL, which I'll show you later. But along with that, this is the location, or this is the URL you need to go for to get hold of the challenge password, which is like a secured password for installing the certificate. So I'll just click on install there. So I'll work on those URLs, and I'll show you the URLs once this installation is complete. Done. So I'll click on close here. So as you can see now, the Network Device Enrollment Service has been installed. So let me go ahead and verify whether this NDES has been installed right. How do I verify it? Just by verifying whether the URLs are good, okay? So for that, again, I'll open up Internet Explorer. And here, I'm going to type http:// and either the IP address, but since I'm doing it on the server itself, I'll type localhost /cert srv, that's the URL for the CA service, and /. Now, for the devices, I need to type MSCEP, that is Microsoft Self-Certificate Enrollment Protocol. Okay, so Microsoft Self-Certificate Enrollment Protocol, so, or the Microsoft Simple Certificate Enrollment Protocol. Okay, that is what it is. So that's the component that is installing. Now, with regards to this, in the older versions of server, that is when I talk about Windows Server 2003 or Windows 2000, you had to actually install a separate add-on for this MSCEP, which you used to get it as part of the resource kit. You know, there was a 2003 resource kit or a Windows Server 2000 resource kit where you had that MSCEP add-on which you could install, and that's how you used to get this particular service for the registration authority or this particular service for network device enrollment service. But starting with 2008, okay, it's natively available and you have to activate it. But saying that in Windows Server 2012, okay, sometimes I think when you install the CA service, NDES also is natively available along with it. Okay, you need not install it separately. Okay, but I think I'll have to cross-check that. But that's what I believe the behavior is when it comes to Windows Server 2012. Okay, so I'll just press enter here, and when I do that, there you go. This is the URL which will be used by network devices to submit the certificate request. Okay, but as an administrator, when I'm requesting or when the device is requesting for the certificate, it needs to have a challenge password, you know, an enrollment challenge password. And to see that enrollment challenge password, the administrator has to go into this particular URL. So let me click on that URL now, and there you go. That's the challenge password. And every single challenge password is valid for a period of 60 minutes. And it's only valid for requesting or enrolling for the certificate. It's not utilized for any other purpose. Okay, it's only for downloading and requesting the certificate from the CA server. So that's the challenge password that I would need. So this I would utilize it later when I'm installing the certificate on the devices. But yeah, that's the URL, or these are the two URLs that I need to work with. Okay, so things are good. I mean, my CA server is completely up and running. Okay, there's nothing else that I need to do. So this is what you need to do when it comes to setting up a CA server using Windows Server 2008. Steps would be a bit different for 2012, and it's totally different when it comes to 2003 and Windows Server 2000. Okay, so because there you need that resource kit as well. Okay, so my CA server is ready. Now let's get back into our GNS3, and now let's look at the clock settings when it comes to these devices here. Okay, so when it comes to the clock settings, the only thing that I need to really work with out here is ASA1 and ASA2. They need to have the correct clock setting. I'm not really concerned with the ISP router here because the ISP router is not going to install any certificate. The VPN peers, you know, we are going to set up the VPN tunnel between ASA1 and ASA2. Okay, so just to show that to you, what I'm going to do is I'll just put up this kind of diagram here, and what I'll do next is I'll just go into configure. Yeah, so I'll just get on into style, and when it comes to fill color, I'll just fill it with red. Okay, apply, and okay. So basically that's representing the VPN tunnel. Okay, so the VPN tunnel is going to be between ASA1 and ASA2. So naturally, you know, these are the two devices, or these are the two VPN peers who are going to get and receive and install the certificate on them. Okay, so let me get on into ASA1 first. And what I'm going to check out here is show clock. And when I do that, what it shows is that it's showing that the clock or date is November 30, 2016. But apart from that, the time it's showing is 0236 hours UTC time, that is GMT, And if I add 7 more hours to it, it would be definitely the time in Thailand. Okay, let's go ahead and verify whether it's really working according to that. So I'll just set up the clock or the time zone out here. So config T. So clock time zone. And I'm going to give this time zone a name of Thai, let's say. And then Thailand is 7 hours ahead of GMT or UTC. So I'll just type 7. And when I do that, I'll just save it. And now if I type show clock, you'll notice that it is 9:37, which is exactly equal to what I have as my system clock out here. Okay. Again, if I type show clock, as you can see, it's exactly in sync. So that's one good thing about working with the current versions of ASA or current version of routers, let's say, because they have their internal hardware clock, which retains the clock settings. Okay. At no point in time do you really need to set up an NTP server. So in our case also, we do not really need to have an NTP server because it is good. The next important thing is, of course, I mean, you need to check that before you install the CA service. But as you can see, even on my Windows Server 2008, it's showing 9:38 a.m. and the date and time zone settings on this particular machine is also good. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes, since it's a virtual machine, you need to make sure that the clock settings and everything are good on it. Okay, because if it's not good, it will mess up the entire config. And that clock setting, you have to make sure that you install it or change it and do the setup before you install the CA service. Okay, so ASA1 is good. Now let's go ahead and check up on ASA2. So on ASA2 as well, I type show clock. And here also, it seems to be good, but let's verify that by setting up the time zone. So clock time zone. Now remember, the time zone can be different, okay? But as long as the clock is the same or the time settings are the correct ones, the time zone can be anything. It does not matter, okay? So time is of importance. It's not about the configuration of the time zone out there, okay? So this also, let's say for now, I'll keep it as Pacific Standard Time, okay? And Pacific is, I think, -8, isn't it? Can you verify that for me? I think it is -8, isn't it? Pacific time? Okay, okay, great. So, and then I'll also type clock summertime, PDT, that's the daylight savings, okay? And then I'll type recurring so that, the clock settings are done according to that. And because of which, I'll just save that. And then I'll type show clock again. And now it shows that it is 1840. That is depending upon the clock settings out there. The reason I did this is so that, we could have a proper configuration of our, basically what I wanted to emulate out here is, let's say R1 and ASA1, they belong to Thailand, and R2 and ASA2, they belong to US Pacific time. Okay, I just wanted to simulate that kind of an environment out here. Okay, and between these two devices, I want to set up the VPN channel. Okay, so that's good. So clock settings are done, NAT configuration is done, IP configuration is also done. Now let's go ahead and download and install the certificates out here. Okay. So do you have any questions at this particular point in time? Okay, okay. I'll just pause the recording for a while. Okay, so yeah, so let's now go ahead and install the certificate on the ASA. So like I was mentioning yesterday, as far as the device certificate installation is concerned, the device needs to have 2 separate certificates. One certificate would be that of the CA server, that's the CA's public certificate or the public key, and then the other one would be an identity certificate, that is ASA Firewall's own certificate. That's what we need to have. Okay. Now, for generating that request or for downloading that certificate, first of all, the ASA needs to have its own private key generated, and that's what we are going to verify first. Okay, so let's go ahead and generate a private key for the ASA, which will facilitate it to request for a certificate from the CA server. So to do that, first of all, let's verify whether there is already any key on this particular ASA. We know for sure that this ASA was blank, but sometimes what happens is, or practically, ASA firewalls have their own internal key. So we need to make sure that whether they have that key or not. So let's check that out. So show crypto key mypub key RSA. That's the command to verify whether there is any key on this ASA firewall. And as you can see, this firewall is blank. That's the reason it does not show any key out there. But you need to make sure that there is a key out there or not, so that you avoid overwriting it, or maybe you want to overwrite it with a new one and stuff like that. Okay. Next step is we need to configure a domain name. Now, the reason I want to configure a domain name is so that the certificate will hold a field for the name for the subject. Okay, so the subject name would be, let's say, host name, that is ASA1 dot, let's say, cisco.com. So if I want to include that kind of a name, that's where the domain name can really help. Okay, so that's why I'll put up the domain name as cisco.com. You can use any domain name you want depending upon how your setup or scenario is. Okay, now once I've done this, let's go ahead and generate the key. So to generate the key, the command is crypto key generate RSA. Now the problem with this command is when you type in this command and press enter, it'll just ask you for the key size. And then that's about it. It does not ask you for the name or anything of the sort. And once it generates the key, the name for that key would be default RSA key because it's a firewall. Firewall does not assign the host name as the name of the key. Okay, that's why it becomes important that when you are generating the key, you'll have to type crypto key generate RSA, and then you type label, and then you define the name for the key. Okay, so you need to define the name manually. If you want to hard code your name of the device onto the key, that's the way you need to go about it. If you do not want to do that, if you just want to use the default RSA key, you can just go ahead and skip this option of defining the label. So here I'm going to define it as asa1.cisco.com. That's going to be the name of the key. And then I can use the optional keyword of modulus. This will allow me to define the key size. Okay, so modulus, I'll define it as 1024. That's the key size that I'm going to utilize. I'll press enter, and there you go. The name for the key would be asa1.cisco.com, and it's generating the key pair right now. Done. Okay, and now if I type show crypto key mypub key RSA, you'll notice the key is definitely shown, and the usage shows general purpose key, and the key name is asa1.cisco.com. Modulus size is 1024. Okay, so the key has been generated, or the private key has been generated. Okay, because it definitely says that it is key pair. It does not show you the complete key pair, but at least it shows you that the key pair was generated out here. Okay, so the key has been generated. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and configure something called as a trust point. What is the functionality of a trust point? The trust point defines information about the CA server. See, ultimately this device has to connect to the CA server, download and request for the certificate, right? So for doing that, it needs to know information about the server, and that's where the trust point comes into play. So let me define the trust point. The command for that is crypto, okay, and then I think it is CA. Yeah. Now that's another important thing. Like when you're working with a router, sometimes it is crypto CA, sometimes it's crypto PKI. But when it comes to the firewall, it is crypto CA. Okay. But again, it might vary depending upon the software version that you're running. Like on version 8.4.2, it is supporting crypto CA. So crypto CA, trust point, and then we need to define a name for it, because it's kind of a profile that you're creating to define or connect to the CA server. So crypto CA trust point, and I'll give it a name of, let's say, WinCA. Okay, you can give it any name you want, but I'm just trying to keep it similar to what we had with regards to the CA server name. Okay, crypto CA trust point and the name. Once I've done that, the next thing that I want to do is I want to define key pair and the name of the key pair. The name of the key pair was asa1.cisco.com. Now, why is this important? This is important because if you do not define this key pair, it will try to keep on searching for the default name that it allocates to the key, that is default RSA key. That's why the key pair name becomes absolutely important. In fact, one of the capabilities or flexibilities of the ASA is you can have multiple key pairs generated with different names, and then you can accordingly utilize those key pairs for requesting certificates or utilizing it in different manner. Okay, so that's one of the flexibility, and that's where the key pair can be useful. The next important thing that you need to define is enrollment URL, and you need to define the URL for your enrollment. Now, when it comes to the URL, when I put question mark, see, the only option that it gives you is line. It does not tell you what URL you want to define, but the URL is going to be http:// and then you have to define the IP address of the CA server, which is 150.0.150.100. That's the IP address of the CA server, /cert srv/mscep. That's the URL that you need to define. Now, you can use double quotes if you want, to enclose this particular URL into double quotes, or else you can just type it this way, and that should do it. Okay, so we have defined the key pair. We've also defined the enrollment URL. But apart from that, when I put question mark here, as you can see, there are a lot of different options that you can define out here. Okay, what I mean by options is you can define a CRL, you can define email address which can be stored in the certificate, or you can define FQDN for the device. You can define IP address to include the IP address, or you can define other options like password for the revocation, that is deleting of the certificate at a later stage. You can include the serial number if you want. Okay. So I hope I'm able to cover that aspect for you. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I actually, can I ask you a question here?
Sure. No problem. Go ahead.
The more of these that you use, does it make it more secure? Why would you want to add additional criteria?
The reason you want to add additional criteria is because, if you add, the more criteria you add, the more parameters are available for you to do a cross-check or a verification when it comes to the PKI authentication.
Okay.
Because ultimately when it comes to certificates, like I said, the basic form of certificate authentication is, it is just going to check whether you have a peer certificate available. That's about it. But if you want additional parameters or additional criteria check, that's where you'll include these parameters, like, let's say, FQDN, or you can define the subject name. You can define, let's say, a serial number, so that, serial number is something unique for individual devices, right? So you can add that additional criteria of carrying out the authentication based on a unique serial number value. That's the kind of thing that you can do. Okay, so here, what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to add some parameters out here so that we can have it as much more secure, or much more parameters to work with. Okay, so let me first add an FQDN. So FQDN, okay, and then there you go. I can type none. That means it will not include any FQDN, but I can also define a fully qualified domain name, that is asa1.cisco.com. Done. Okay, FQDN, I've defined it. The next thing that I'm going to define is, let's say, I've already defined the key pair. I'll also type serial number so that it includes the serial number inside it. Okay, so I'll just type serial number and press enter. That should include the serial number. And the next important thing that I want to define is subject name. Now, when I talk about subject name, this is what is practically or commonly utilized when it comes to certificate verification. The reason I say this is commonly utilized is because after subject name, you can define various attributes. Like, see, subject name with attributes separated by commas. That is what you can define out here. Okay, so let's say I define subject name, and now we need to define the various attributes in the appropriate fashion. Okay, what I mean by attributes in the appropriate fashion would be, I can define OU name. Okay, I can define attributes related to, let's say, distinguished name. I can define parameters like these. So let's say for this example, I'll use OU equal to, and let's say for this example, OU, or the organizational unit that where I want to place ASA1 would be Thailand office. Okay, that's what I want to utilize out here. Okay, and then like it says, subject name with attributes separated by commas. Okay, so that's why I put up a comma. Okay, and now since it is going to include spaces, it would be a good idea to include it in this fashion. I'll keep it this way, double quotes for Thailand office, so that it can accommodate that string. And then after the comma, I'll type CN equal to ASA1, comma DC equal to Cisco, comma DC equal to com. Okay, that's what I'm going to define. Okay, so basically I'll just show you the entire config, okay, once I complete it, but that's what I want to do out here. Okay, so once I've done this, okay, the next important option that I want to define is TRL. Okay, so I'll just pause the recording here. It seems like the ASA has got stuck. Okay. Yeah, okay. So I'm just defining all those parameters again so that it generates the key. And this time what I'll do is after every line, I'll just make sure that I save it, okay, so that I don't lose the configs. Okay. And then once I've done that, crypto CA trust point, I'll give it a name of WinCA and key pair, and I'll give it the name of the key pair, that is asa1.cisco.com. Now, once I've done that, enrollment URL, and then next thing is FQDN. Then subject name, or let's say I also include serial number. And then next thing that I'll do is subject name. Now, for this option, okay, I'll type OU, okay, equal to Thailand office. And then let's say enter for now. Okay, I just want to make sure that I just add one subject name for now, just to make sure that we have at least one attribute. And then what I'll do is I'll type show run crypto CA, just so that you can see the output of how it goes. Okay, so this is what I have. So as you can see in this example, I have crypto CA trust point, that's the name of the trust point, and all these parameters is what it has filled up. But as you can see, under subject name, the only thing that it included was Thailand office, nothing else. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll type subject name, just like before, comma, CN equal to, and then ASA1, comma, DC equal to Cisco, comma, DC equal to com. Basically, I'm including the distinguished name for it, okay? So I'll just press enter, and then I'll just save it. Done, okay? And now if I type show run crypto CA, there you go. That is what it has done. So I'm just verifying whether all the parameters have been saved properly, and that's going to be the subject name for this particular ASA. Okay.
Right.
Now the final thing that I want to also configure as part of this is the CRL. That's the certificate revocation list. The CRL.
Do you want to start recording again? Oh, you are recording. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I am recording right now. Okay. So yeah. So as far as CRL or certificate revocation list is concerned, this is a link where it's going to store information about all the certificates that have been blocked. Okay. And at this point, CRL is set to configure, but let's say I have the option of defining CRL, and then we can define no check. Okay. But of course, this is like deprecated. It's an old form of the command. Instead, the new option that is available is revocation check as a parameter that you can configure. Okay. But if you keep it as CRL required, okay, which means, it will always look up for the certificate into the CRL, which means you have to configure the CRL or the URL that is related to the certificate revocation list, and then only it will be able to communicate. And for that, practically, it would be useful to have a DNS or something like that, because the URL will always be not the IP, but instead it will be http://winca, which is nothing but the name of the machine. That's where the DNS becomes important. Okay, so for this particular example, what I'm going to do is I'll keep it as revocation check, okay, and then I'll keep it as none. But practically, revocation check none will not make sense. Instead, there we are using a practical URL, right, based on a domain name or something like that. So that URL will make sense, okay. Or I have to manually configure the URL for the certificate revocation list, okay. So in this case, I'll just keep it as revocation check none, and then I'll just save it, so that the trust point is now complete. The next aspect that I want to do is I need to now go ahead and connect to the CA server and request for the certificate. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. When it comes to the certificate, like I told you, the first certificate that I need is the CA certificate itself. So for that, the command is crypto CA, okay, authenticate, and then the name of the trust point is what I need to define. The name of my trust point was WinCA, and when I do that and press enter, okay, it's saying receiving certificate authority status failed. Okay, now that's what I want to verify, or that's what I want to check as to what's happening here. Okay, let me also do a show connection, show localhost. Okay. I'll unpause the recording. Okay, so again, I'll type in crypto CA trust point WinCA, and under that, no CRL configure. Okay, that will remove that aspect. Okay, and then exit, and then I'll also type revocation check none and WR. And now, based on that, let me now check show run crypto.
Uh-oh. I think it froze again.
Oh,
you know what? You know what?
So at this point, yeah. So this is the configuration that we have. So what I'll do is I'll type revocation check none. Okay, that should do it. And that takes care of the CRL not being checked at this point. Okay, I mean, that's one other thing that I do. And CRL, and now these are the options that are available. But let's say I keep it as no check. That's like the old command that is available. So let me try with that. Show run crypto CA. Yeah, it still shows, as you can see, a CRL configure. So that shouldn't be a problem. I mean, we have put a revocation check none, so that should be okay. Yeah, so at this point, that's taken care of. But what I'll do next is ping 200.0.200.1. It can reach that, and ping 150.0.150.1. It can reach that as well. So it can definitely go ahead and try to connect to the CA server. So let me try that. So crypto CA authenticate, and then I'll type win CA. So this time it did not throw up an error immediately, but let's give it some time and then check what's happening. Meanwhile, I'll get back into the, oh, I totally forgot to switch on my virtual machine. So let me pause the recording and I'll switch on the virtual machine and try again, okay? Yeah, so I'll now get on into ASA1 at this point since my server is up. And now let me try crypto CA authenticate win CA. And again, it comes up with status fail, cert length 0. Why is that?
Oh, what's happening?
Yeah, that's trust point win CA, and then enrollment URL http 150.0.150.100 / cert srv / mscep / mscep.dll. Maybe this could be really a problem, or could be the issue. Let's cross check that real quick. Show run crypto CA. Okay. So let me try now. So crypto CA authenticate win CA. And yes, that was exactly the problem. Thank you for bringing it to my notice. Okay, I totally skipped my head. Okay, so do you accept the certificate? I'll type yes. And there you go. My CA certificate has been accepted. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that is the CA certificate.
Right. That was just the CA certificate. Remember, it's not the identity certificate.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And now we can verify it by typing in show crypto CA certificate. And when I do that, as you can see, CA certificate, it shows status of available. That's the serial number for that certificate. Certificate usage is signature, type is RSA, and that's the size of the keys that we had set on the CA server, right? The signature algorithm is SHA-1 with RSA encryption, and look at that. The CN equal to win CA is the subject name for it, and start date and end date, which is like 5 years, which is what we configured on the CA server. Okay. Now remember, this is just a CA certificate. Now we need to get hold of the identity certificate. For that, the command would be crypto CA enroll, and then the name of the trust point, that is win CA. And now when I do this, okay, this is where we would need that challenge password. Like, let me type that in. http:// cert srv, localhost, let's say, / cert srv / mscep_admin. That's the URL that we need to go for. And then administrator password. There you go. Okay, so that's the challenge password that I need. So I'll just copy it, because this is what we need to paste onto the device when it's requesting for the password, or requesting for the certificate. So when I press enter here, there you go. Create a challenge password. You'll need to verbally provide this password to the CA administrator in order to revoke your certificate. Okay, so I'll just paste the password there. I'll just right click there, enter, paste it, and there you go. See, the subject name in the certificate would be OU equal to Thailand office, comma, CN equal to ASA1, DC equal to Cisco, DC equal to com. And as you can see, okay, OU equal to Thailand office is also including the quotes, double quotes, which is not what we want, right? Okay, we want it to be like without the quotes. Okay, So that's something that we need to go ahead and change in our config, because the reason I put up those courses, because sometimes, devices act up in the sense they don't treat it as a single word, or they include the spaces and then they mess up the config altogether. That's why I included the codes. But then for this particular config, it's not needed. So what I'll do is, rather than requesting for the certificate right now, I'll just type no. Okay, so that the certificate is not requested. And then I'll get back into the trust point. So show run crypto CA again. Okay, and as you can see, the CA certificate is shown in this format right now as part of it, but that's what I want to modify now. So I'll just copy this line. Okay, so I'm inside the trust point, and when it comes to subject name, I'll just copy this text here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and remove the double quotes and enter. And now I'll just save it and show run crypto CA. There you go. Now it shows Thailand office without the double quote. So the parameters now would be perfect, like just like the way we want it. And now let's go ahead and enroll for the certificate again. Okay. So crypto CA enroll win CA. That's a command to enroll for the certificate or identity certificate. And now it's asking for a password. Okay, but what I'll try to do is, rather than copying and pasting this enrollment challenge password, okay, let me go ahead and try to just do it without a password. Okay, just want to show you what happens there. Okay, so I'll just put up a blank password. I'm not typing in anything. Re-enter password also blank, and see that it's going to include the subject name as this, fully qualified domain name would be this, and serial number would be this one. So request certificate from CA, yes, and it's saying certificate request has been sent to the certificate authority, and as you could see, the certificate enrollment request was denied by the CA. That's because the challenge password was not correct. Okay, so that's the reason that challenge password becomes absolutely important, or the enrollment password becomes absolutely important. So let me go ahead and do the command again, and this time I'll just copy and paste the challenge password. Copy, paste it again, and request certificate from CA, yes. So certificate request has been sent. Let's wait for a while. Okay, so as you could see, this time it did not come up with a deny message at all, right? And neither have we got any certificate. It does not show me any message like we have received the certificate or something. And if I type show crypto CA certificate, as you can see, okay, it is definitely showing RA key and cipher certificate, issuer name CN equal to win CA, subject name equal to CN win CA MSCEP RA. That's the registration authority. That's the CA certificate that it shows. But as far as the certificate is concerned, it says status pending. It has not downloaded or installed the certificate yet. What is the reason for it? The reason is, whenever we talk about a standalone certificate authority, that is what we have installed here, right? We, as an administrator or the CA administrator, have to go into the CA server and issue that certificate. Because at this point, when you go into that particular certification authority, you will find that the certificate would be under pending state. Like when I expand the server here and pending request, there you go. It says taken under submission. And this is where the administrator is going to look at the details. Like if I click on view attributes or extensions, okay, now that's what he sees. But when I go into extensions, okay, it says key usage, subject alternative name, there you go, DNS name, asa1.cisco.com, subject key identifier. Okay, so you can verify whether everything is good. Okay, every parameter is matching according to, or he can verify whether this user is genuine or this device is genuine. And once he has verified all of that, he just has to right click on it, Alt Tab, and issue. Done. Okay, so that's just something that you need to look out for, because the CA server is just not going to issue the certificate. Administrator has to intervene. He has to cross-check whether everything is good, and then he can issue the certificate. And now, as you can see, number 4, okay, is there. And if I go into all tabs and, or let's say I click on open, there you go. Issued to ASA1, issued by WinCA. And when I go into details, that's the version number, serial number, signature algorithm, issuer, valid from, that's November 30, 2016, and valid to 2017. That's for 1 year, but this is the main thing. Subject, it clearly shows me all the attributes which I had included in that certificate. And that's what helps me understand that this certificate is correct. But again, remember, I've issued the certificate, but let's check whether the certificate has been received by the ASA. So let's go down to ASA1. There you go. Certificate has been granted by the CA. So I'll just quickly save it because I want to make sure that it goes into my flash and it's not lost. And now if I type show crypto CA certificate, okay, and now you should definitely see 2 separate certificates. One is certificate, which is nothing but the identity certificate, and it clearly tells me the certificate serial number, issuer name, subject name. Now, as you can see, host name is shown, CN equal to OU equal to. So I can use each of these parameters for verification of my certificate authentication. That's the CRL, the URL for the certificate distribution revocation list. The validity of that certificate is for 1 year, as you can see, and that's the CA certificate, which is valid for 5 years. Okay, so ASA1 is now good. I'll quickly go ahead and configure ASA2 as well, so that it can also receive the certificates accordingly. Okay. So once we're done with ASA2, requesting and downloading the certificate, we'll stop the session and we'll continue tomorrow. Is that okay with you? Okay, so let's continue now. So first thing again, domain name, I'll keep it as, let's say something else, okay, just to make sure that it looks something more genuine or more interesting, you know. Okay, so let's say instead of cisco.com, I'll just keep it as testcorp.com. Okay, something else. Okay, so this is done, and now next thing that I want to do is I'll just save it just so that I don't lose the config, and then I'll type crypto key generate RSA label. I'm going to keep it as asa2.testcorp.com, and then modulus, I'll keep it as 1024. There you go. That's the key that is going to generate. Done. I'll just save it real quick. And then the next thing that I want to do is I'll type crypto CA trust point, and then let's say I give it the same kind of a name, but it's not necessary that you give it the same name. Okay, it could be anything that basically helps me identify the trust point. So here I'll type key pair first, key pair asa2.testcorp.com, and then enrollment URL. I'll have to type http://150.0.150.100/cert/srv/mscep, and this time I won't forget mscep.dll. Okay, so that's something that I had forgotten last time. Next thing, I'll also put up FQDN as asa2.testcorp.com. Then serial number, I'll include that as well. And then next thing that I want to do is subject name is what I want to include. And this time I'll keep it as OU equal to, let's say, US office, comma, cn equal to ASA2, comma, DC equal to test corp, comma, DC equal to comp. Now again, remember, it all depends on how you want to define the attributes. Okay, it's not necessary that you always have to define it in the same format. It will be ultimately useful later when we actually do the verification for it. Next, I'll also type revocation check, none. Oh, sorry. And then I'll also make sure that I type CRL no check. Okay, but even though we've done that, it's not going to show it in the config anyways, but I just made sure that I added that. And once I've done this, okay, if I type show run crypto CA, you'll see this is what I've configured. Okay, now based on this, let's now go ahead and quickly download the CA certificate. So crypto CA authenticate WinCA. There you go, that's the certificate which comes up immediately. Okay, so that's the main thing. I mean, if you've done the config right, there is no need or no reason why it should fail or anything. You know, it's just other factors that could cause a problem, like network connectivity or anything of that sort. Okay, next thing, crypto CA enroll WinCA again, but this time I need the challenge password, so I'll just make sure that I have the password with me. So I'll just copy it again, just so that I don't miss it. ASA2, I'll just paste it again, and there you go. That's the information that it's going to include. I'll type yes, and certificate request has been sent, but it's saying it was denied. Okay, I think what I just need to do is, maybe the certificate has expired or something. I'm not really sure, but I'll just refresh it just so that the password is refreshed. Okay, so I'll just copy. Let me get back again, back into this ASA2, and then let me try that again. So crypto CA enroll, paste it again. Yes. Okay. So I think now it's good. It was more to do with the challenge password, I guess. So let me get back in here, pending request, and there you go. Number 5 has come up, which is nothing but the new request. I can verify it by going into all tasks and view, and we should see that it's meant for asa2.testcorp.com. So let me go ahead and issue it. So once I've done that, now if I get back into ASA2, we should see the certificate received. So the message has not come up, but if I type show crypto CA certificate, okay, it's still not received, I believe. Yeah, I think it will take a little while, I guess. So let me check back up again. Nope, not yet received there. Oh, I think now, no. Basically, I'm just waiting for the message to come up. I think it has. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got it. Yeah.
You did.
Yeah, there you go. That's my certificate that I've received. Okay. Yep. I mean, I think I missed out on that message which I was supposed to receive.
Yeah, no, it showed up. It was very quick.
Okay. No problem. Okay, so there you go. The subject name is shown as ASA2. It's part of US office and it's valid for a period of 1 year, as you can see. Okay, and it's based on the PST. That's the time zone that we had defined. So that completes the session for today. Okay. Yes, I did save the config so that we don't lose it. Okay. But yeah, it has all the certificates and all the configs across all the devices, so it should be all right. Okay. So I think I'll stop the recording for the session. Okay.